Dr. Turek, I'm only asking if you would murder your wife or children to prove your devotion. It's a simple question.
I don't know what would happen. And by the way, when God decides that someone should die, it's not murder for him.
It is stunning to me that massacre and genocide gets applauded in this building. God
Cody,
demands slaughter, massacre, and genocide.
All right, Cody, there's nothing wrong with genocide if atheism's true.
Are you serious?
If atheism's true, there is nothing wrong with genocide.
I am an atheist and I oppose genocide in every possible, in every way.
But that's just your personal opinion because there's no standard beyond you which says it's wrong.
This atheist asked Frank Turek one of the hardest moral questions that someone could ever ask somebody. Now let's see Frank Turek's brilliant reply as he takes this much deeper.
Dr. Turek, God commanded you to murder your wife or children to prove your faith in God. Is your current devotion not enough to prove your faith? Must you murder your children as Abraham was instructed?
First of all, I don't know what I would do.
This is a simple yes or no question, Doc.
I don't know what I would do in Abraham's position. That's a good question. You know who really struggled with that? Soren Kierkegaard, who wrote a book called...
Is your faith strong enough to murder your own children or wife?
I'm thinking, and since I'm from New Jersey, it's really hard for me to do, so give me a minute. The book is called Fear and Trembling by Soren Kierkegaard. So I don't know what I would do, just like I'm never going to say if somebody put a gun to my head or a gun to my wife's head, what would you do? Because Peter tried that. I'll never deny you, Lord. And what did he do?
He denied him 3 times. Yes, at the crucifixion.
I don't know what I would do, okay? But let me point out, if your friend is an atheist, there's nothing wrong with God doing anything because by atheism, there's no standard of right and wrong anyway. So in order for you to bring up the objection, you're actually stealing a standard from God in order to try and say God doesn't exist.
Dr. Turek, I'm only asking if you would murder your wife or children to prove your devotion. It's a simple question.
I don't know what would happen. And by the way, when God decides that someone should die, it's not murder for him. Because God kills all of us at some point. And he's the only one that can resurrect us. So we don't have the right to murder people, but God has the right to kill people anytime he wants. He can strike me down today, tomorrow, anytime he wants, and it's completely in his prerogative.
God has the right to slaughter the Amalekites down to the last man, woman, and child.
God has the right to take us out anytime we want, because if Christianity's true, men don't really die, we just change location. And God can do that anytime he wants.
The question of, is your current devotion enough to prove your faith? How I would answer that question is, yes, my current devotion is enough to prove my faith. But even further, we're not saved by our devotion or our works. We are saved and justified because of Jesus Christ and the work that he did for us. Whereas Abraham's obedience, it is the very reason that I have my faith. Now, we also have to understand that he is the father of our faith. And Abraham was asked to do something that only Abraham would be asked to do for. So if I were to put myself in Abraham's shoes in that day and time, that means I would be a father of the faith. And I would like to say that I believe I would be obedient to God. And we also see that Abraham did not murder his child. He was not asked to murder his child. He was asked to give him up as a sacrifice. So we also see Abraham believed that this probably wasn't even going to happen, but he was following through with it. As he said to the people that came with him to do the sacrifice, he said, me and the boy will be back.
God has the right to take us out anytime we want, because if Christianity's true, men don't really die, we just change location. And God can do that anytime he wants. So thank you for your question.
It is stunning to me that massacre and genocide gets applauded in this building. God demands slaughter, massacre, and genocide.
All right, Cody, there's nothing wrong with genocide if atheism's true.
Are you serious?
If atheism's true, there is nothing wrong with genocide.
I am an atheist and I oppose genocide in every possible... in every way.
But that's just your personal opinion because there's no standard beyond you which says it's wrong.
The standard that says it's correct that I will help my fellow human, up to and including you, especially you, doctor, that I would never harm anyone in this room.
Okay, I'm glad.
Atheism,
Cody.
Are you suggesting that atheism allows or purports or wants genocide?
Atheism,
I know you wouldn't say, you would never say that.
Yes, atheism does allow it. You can ask Mao, you can ask Stalin, you can ask Pol Pot, because if there is no authority beyond the government, they are God.
I could not possibly agree. I could not possibly disagree that those people were atheists. But as Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens would both argue, as you well know, none of those people slaughtered millions in the name of atheism. There are countless millions.
All right, Cody, this isn't a debate, okay?
I know.
I thank you for being here.
Doc.
But let me deal, because Cody, I love talking about this stuff, but there's a line of people behind you, and so we can't keep going back and forth. But I do want to answer your question about the Canaanites.
Is God immoral for massacre, slaughter, and racism and slavery?
Cody, look, we don't have time to deal with all those. Trust me, I have slides for every one of them, okay? Let me just deal with the Canaanite one, if you'd be so gracious as to sit down.
I would
or
be
go
so
to the
gracious.
back of the
Thank you,
line,
doctor.
And I'll deal with that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, doctor.
All right, thank you. So, as I just mentioned, with the Canaanite issue, if there's no God, why would any Old Testament atrocity be wrong? But Cody is correct about this. He has a fair point to ask me, despite the fact that he being an atheist has no objective standard by which to judge anything right or wrong. He is correct to ask me, you're saying your God is a God of love, so why does he do such things? So that's a fair question, okay? All right. Secondly, though, is God arbitrary, or does he give reasons in the Old Testament for judging people? Because that's what it is in the Old Testament. It's judging. God is not a cosmic mafia boss. He doesn't wake up one day and say, Canaanites, I want them dead. No, there's a reason that he has decided to push the Canaanites out of the land, and it's because they've had 400 years of iniquity, including murdering their children, sacrificing their children on the molten hot metal god Molech. And it wasn't just the Old Testament that talks about this. The Greek writer Plutarch says that when the Canaanites would do this, the drummers in the town would pound their drums louder so the children or the parents couldn't hear the screams of their own children being sacrificed. Also, I hear this quite a bit. Why complain that God doesn't stop evil, but then complain when he does? In other words, sometimes atheists will say, why didn't God stop such and such a tragedy? Yet here, God sees that this culture is so degraded that he finally says these people must be stopped, and he sends the Israelites in to stop them, and now atheists are complaining about it. And the question I always ask people, is God committing murder by ending lives on earth? And the answer is no. God doesn't murder anyone. He can't murder anyone. He is the creator of life. He can resurrect it. Only people who are other creations can commit murder. When God ends somebody's life, it's not murder. And as I mentioned a minute ago, God has the right to usher people into the next life whenever he wants. Whether we're 82 or 2 years old, that's up to him. People never die, they just change location. And we also need to remember that the Old Testament theocracy was unique and temporary. It was not the ideal for all time, but the means to a promised new covenant. And the best book on this topic is by Paul Copan, Is God a Moral Monster? And Cody's actually bringing up good questions that Christians need to deal with. And Copan goes through all of those issues. One is the Canaanites, another slavery, these kinds of issues. And you can get that book if you want to go further. But this is not genocide. It's actually judgment. Why? How do I know? Because God did the same thing to Israel. God took out the Israelites through the Babylonians and the Assyrians. And he also took out the Israelites after they worshiped the golden calf. It was judgment, not genocide.
Cody asks Frank Turek, are you suggesting that atheism allows genocide? And yes, of course it allows genocide. Let's cite Richard Dawkins and his work for the selfish gene, which shows based on evolution, all of us have a selfish gene inside of all of us, in every single organism that wants to promote the survival of itself, the survival of its own organism, right? So if the selfish gene sees that it would be right or beneficial for the survival of itself to commit genocide on a different group of people or anybody, then atheism says that's right, because the selfish gene inside of me is pushing me to do that. And that's exactly what we see with Frank Turek quoting Mao or Stalin and so forth. And I like Frank Turek's closing statement where he says, it's not genocide, it's judgment. God did the same thing to the people of Israel, his chosen people, which shows he doesn't show favoritism or partiality. He has a moral standard that we must adhere to and be obedient and understand that he gives us patience. But it's judgment, not genocide. Be blessed.